Macarons are easy to make. I'll show you how to do it so that you don't have to pay $2 to $5 each time you crave one. We're making salted caramel and popcorn macarons with a whipped chocolate ganache filling. This recipe covers the last part of the Great British Bake Off Season 1, Episode 2, where I had to make 3 types of petit fours, and the final one was macarons. First, make the salted caramel. You'll need 80 grams sugar, 30 grams butter, 120 grams whipping cream, and 1.5 to 3 grams of salt. The exact amount of salt really depends on your tolerance for salt and sweet pastries. Here I used 1.5 grams because I wanted to test it out, but the original recipe called for 3, but I chickened out. Start with a dry caramel. Just melt the sugar over medium heat until it turns golden brown on the darker side. The darker your caramel, the less sweet and more bitter it'll taste, so play with the color to get the flavor you like. At the same time, bring your cream to a boil in a separate pan or in a microwave. Once the caramel is ready, add the butter and mix really well until smooth. It might take a few minutes. Then carefully add the hot cream in small batches, but be careful because it will bubble up like crazy. Stir until smooth again and then add the salt. Mix and set aside. Now let's move on to the ganache. You'll need 100 grams of white chocolate with at least 34-35% cocoa solids. Then take 200 grams of cream in total and divide it into 50 and 150 grams. Add 6 grams of flavorful honey to the smaller 50 grams portion of cream. Melt the chocolate in the microwave in short bursts, about 30 seconds each, checking and stirring in between. You can stop when most of it is melted, even if a few pieces remain, that's fine. Now take the 50 grams of cream with honey and bring it to a boil. Pour it over the chocolate, stir, and then blend it with a hand blender until smooth and glossy. Then pour in the salted caramel and blend again until smooth and glossy. And finally add 150 grams of cold cream and yes, you guessed it right, blend until smooth and glossy. But don't overdo it because we don't want to start whipping our cream. Just stop whenever it comes together. Cover with plastic wrap, touching the surface, and refrigerate overnight. Day 2. Today we're baking the shells and assembling the macarons. I'm using my favorite and I think the easiest recipe for the shells. It's from the Ladurée book. If you ever try their macarons, they taste pretty close, although I'm sure they didn't share their exact production recipe. By the way, the ganache recipe was from my favorite baking magazine from France, Food de Patisserie. For the shells, you'll need 4 egg whites, which is around 120 grams, 165 grams almond flour, 150 grams of icing sugar, and 125 grams granulated sugar. As you can see, it's just 4 ingredients. We'll start with a French meringue. That's basically just whipped egg whites and sugar. If you don't have a stand mixer, hand mixer works fine here as well. It'll just take a bit longer. You want to start on medium speed and wait until your egg whites become foamy, and then you can start adding sugar gradually. You want to do it in about 4 to 5 portions. Maybe wait a minute or two between each addition. We want the sugar to dissolve completely, and when it's glossy and holds stiff peaks, you're done. Now here, recipes usually say to sift the almond flour and icing sugar together, but honestly, I just whisk them together to break up the lumps. If your almond flour is a bit coarse, then sifting will help remove some of those larger bits. Next, combine everything together. Dump the dry ingredients into the meringue and start mixing. Do not be afraid to really go for it because we're not trying to keep all that air. We actually want the batter to fall from the spatula in a ribbon. This step is very important. Overmix and your macarons will flatten. If you undermix, they will stay too tall and pointy. Next, fill a piping bag fitted with a 6 to 8 millimeter round nozzle and pipe circles about 2.5–3.5 centimeters wide. I personally prefer baking macarons on parchment paper because I feel like it helps the moisture escape a little bit better, but you can absolutely use a silicone mat. You can trace circles if you want them to be even, but I didn't do that, so mine will be a little bit mismatched. I also sprinkled some caramel popcorn on a few shells just to see how they'd bake. Next, preheat the oven to 325F or 160C and let the shells rest until they form a crust. So when you touch them, they should feel completely dry. It usually takes about 30 minutes, but it really depends on humidity in your kitchen. Once the shells are ready, bake them for about 15 minutes. Baking time and temperature are always up for debate when it comes to macarons. I baked my first batch at 350F or 180C for 13 minutes, but that was too hot for my oven. You might need a few tries to find your sweet spot. If your macarons are underbaked inside but starting to brown, or if they brown too quickly, it means your oven is too hot. If they stay pale and flat after 15 minutes, it's too cool. Watch the color, watch the texture inside, and watch the height of the feet. All this will tell you what's going on inside your oven. Now, once baked, let them cool completely. While they're cooling down, whip the ganache until it holds stiff-ish peaks, but be careful because it goes from under-whipped to butter in no time. You'll see the texture changing, and when the ripples look more pronounced, it's time to stop and check. Then pipe the filling using a 5 to 6 millimeters round nozzle, and I like to pair up the shells by size first and then line them on a tray. It just makes the process quicker. I also added a bit of popcorn inside the filling just for fun. Now they're finally ready to rest in the fridge overnight. Never eat them right away. So we're in day 3 and it's finally tasting time. This is the best part. And if you ever had a macaron before, you know exactly what to expect. You'll have slight crunch on the outside and then a soft, chewy interior with a creamy filling. That's exactly why you need to let them rest overnight, because it allows everything to sort of melt together. If you eat them the same day, they'll still be good, but more like an almond cookie with filling. Think Oreo, but macaron. Now, as for this flavor combination, I actually really love it. Just make sure your caramel is on the darker side because it really balances the sweetness here. And yes, use at least 2 to 3 grams of salt to cut through all that sugar from the shells and chocolate. So I hope today you've learned that making macarons isn't hard. It just takes a little bit of patience and practice. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.